Hello and welcome. This is GN Live and I am Gilbert Nyambabvum. Today we are again talking about a subject that I think is important and in line with my preferred theme of highlighting and mainstreaming diaspora conversations. So recently here in the UK we had conservative media talking about immigrants and trying to whip up anti-migrant sentiment. But they were making claims which I found to be outrageous, disingenuous and ahistorical and therefore inviting challenge. Let's take a listen to this.
But this is much bigger scandal. I mean, it's a rogue's charter. Basically, it's money being sent home by money transfer, and it's called remittances, which is a boring name, but it's money transferred back to the home country. And the World Bank has overridden our figures and said our figures are wrong. And it's 24.5 billion a year that is being sent back by migrants, newly arrived asylum seekers, people on bogus student visas.
They are talking about migration into the UK. Migration into the UK and the billions of pounds which they claim migrants are remitting back to their home countries, which money would otherwise be available to support important public services in the UK, such as healthcare. But there's something they're not talking about. They're not talking about emigration. In other words, British nationals leaving the UK to go and live abroad. Just to give an example, in South Africa alone, we have more than 200,000 British nationals living and working in South Africa. Have you heard South Africans complaining about these British nationals taking their jobs? Have you heard South Africans complaining about these British nationals putting pressure on important services such as healthcare and housing? Have you heard South Africans complaining about these British nationals remitting millions of dollars back to the UK? Welcome back. This is GN Live and I am Gilbert Nyambabvum. First of all, before we go into today's topic, I want to acknowledge and commend the engagement and feedback we got in terms of the last episode, where we were talking about and highlighting the medium to long-term headwinds in terms of the remittances that Zimbabwe gets from the diaspora, which at the moment stand at some 2.5 billion pounds if you're looking at the formal inflows alone, but it might very well be around 3 billion US dollars. The idea was not to be prescriptive, but to encourage Zimbabweans to have conversations which we think are necessary around these issues. And I'm encouraged by the fact that there was some really amazing engagement. And we also had people who are in positions of authority and policy making taking part in the discussions. And the other thing which was also clear was that the subject is so important that it requires some really extensive and comprehensive treatment. And so we'll be looking to get back to it in future episodes of this program. But today I want to talk about what is happening in the UK and I'm sure elsewhere in the West, where in terms of migration, we see what is happening in the US. But in the UK here, we again very recently had the conservative and right-wing media continuing this campaign, as we said earlier on, of whipping up anti-migrant sentiment. The idea being to get the government to harden its positions and policies against migration. The main problem with the discussion around migration in the UK today, which we want to address, is that it is one-sided. It is not discussing the other side of the coin. It continues as if there is only migration and not emigration. You get the impression that there isn't a situation of British nationals leaving this country to go and live in the countries of other people and causing the same kind of problems that British nationals here are complaining in terms of migrants who are coming to the UK. So what are the numbers? The data from the BBC and the University of Oxford shows that as of now, there is some 5.5 million British nationals who are living and working abroad. 5.5 million British nationals who are living and working abroad. And you rarely hear that number feature in the discussions around migration. I'm going to explain why that is important. But first of all, let's look at where these people are. The most popular destination for these people is Australia. There is some 1.3 million British nationals living and working in Australia. Next under Australia is Spain. There's some 761,000 of them. And then you've got the United States, 678,000. Some 600,000 are in Canada. And then you have Ireland, you have New Zealand, and then you have France. Now, one of the common complaints that we get in terms of migration into the UK is that these are people who are economic migrants. They are not people who are refugees and need protection. But let's look at the reasons given by the 5.5 million British nationals who have chosen to go live and work abroad. A survey done in 2024 shows that 39% of the people who were asked and were looking to go and live abroad cited the cost of living crisis in the UK, number one. And then he had some 22% who cited the high cost of property in the UK. And 12% cited better job prospects abroad. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, these sound like economic reasons, which would therefore make these 5.5 million British nationals who are living outside of the country as much of economic migrants as we are here in the UK. But beyond the economic reasons, you also have issues of better lifestyles and better weather abroad. Let's listen to these two British ladies who have chosen to go and settle in Zimbabwe.
Moving on to why we moved from the UK to Zimbabwe. My husband worked really long hours. I had a business called Nat's Kitchen, which was very busy. And we were just working. And when we wasn't working, we were cleaning, cooking, keeping on top of household chores. All of that alongside all of the rising bills that we had to pay was just a struggle. It was a stressful way of life. Also, the weather didn't help either.
Why I'm moving to Zimbabwe. So it's not somewhere I ever thought I'd go and live. It wasn't like on my list. But now having been, I absolutely adore the country, love the people, love it what it's about. And I do love it, and it's just much slower pace of life than the UK. I would say arguably it's a better quality of life. You know, I just feel like I've got more time to do everything there. You know, the food's lovely, the people are lovely.
Right, so there you have it. It's about economic reasons, and then you also have better lifestyle and better weather abroad. But I want to come back to the complaint that migrants in the UK are taking billions of pounds and remitting that money back to their home countries. It is important to put that claim into context. To begin with, if you're looking at Zimbabweans who are living in the UK, the estimation is that they remit back to Zimbabwe 10% of their income. In other words, from my individual gross product, 10% is going to Zimbabwe, and it's not even like monthly regularly now. What that means is that 90% of my gross economic productivity remains here in the UK. So it's just the 10% which these people are complaining about. On to that, when you look at the money that is remitted by the 5.5 million British nationals who are living abroad, the money that they send back to the UK, you're going to find that the argument balances or cancels itself out. According to the University of Oxford data from 2023, the British nationals who are living and working abroad are remitting back to the UK some £3.6 billion. That was the figure in 2023, and most likely it's gone up by now. Now, if you want to be historical and make an even stronger point, you can add to that 3.6 billion historical proceeds from empire. Let's look at the amount of money that Britain is said to have earned from its colonial adventures in the Americas through Africa, Oceania, and Asia. According to estimates, Britain earned some £35 trillion from its colonial adventures. Now, when you add that historical figure and what is coming to the UK today, it becomes very clear that the right-wing media in the UK, who are making noise about migration and the money that is supposed to be leaving the UK to go back to countries like Zimbabwe, don't really have much to complain about. But to close, when I was in television news production years ago, one of the things we used to make absolutely sure was that the people we put in front of the camera to present the news to our audiences were people who had the benefit of a brain and some schooling. That was important for one key reason, in order that we don't burden our audiences with stupid arguments.